I'm Adi Matias.
Wait a minute, Susan, I can't hear you. I don't know if you have the talk button down. You may need to start again.
Betty, I'm sorry. I did not have the talk button down. Can we re-record?
Sure. Hold on a sec. I'll stop it and start it again.
Hi, everybody. This is the real-time session on guidelines and rationale essays. My name is Susan Oakes.
And I am Adi Matias.
And we welcome you to this session. As you go along, think about what you hope to learn about guidelines and rationale essays. Jot down any questions you might have, and make sure that you connect with your mentor to ask those questions. We'll also try to answer if anybody has a question. A lot of students, when they come to Empire State College and start the degree planning process, really have a question about why do we have these things called guidelines? Why can't you just tell us what to take and we'll put it in our degree? We do have guidelines really to give a little bit more flexibility because we are a college designed for adult students. And adults come with a lot of learning that they've already gained on their own through work, through training, through a variety of sources. So having guidelines both helps us ensure that you have some of the standard knowledge in the type of degree that you want, knowledge that's expected in a college degree of that name. But because they are guidelines, they give you a little bit more flexibility to interpret that knowledge and those knowledge expectations in your own way. So that's why we have the little image down there in the corner. It's both structured and flexible at the same time. And that really is what guidelines are intended to do, give you that middle point between structure and flexibility.
What is important about the guidelines is that they help you address all the key knowledge expectations in terms of all the general knowledge you should have in your during your term here at Empire State College and or other that you're bringing, as well as any knowledge specific to your concentration. But, and there's a big but, this does not mean that you need to have a course for each area, each knowledge expected. And this is perhaps one of the major confusion points about the guidelines. You can address these guidelines with any knowledge that you bring, including coursework from other institutions, learning contracts through independent studies, as well as prior learning assessment, and even discussing your knowledge within the rationale essay. So again, that idea that you need to have a course per every expected knowledge area, is not correct. Now, we do have, the guidelines also help, as we mentioned, they list those expectations, and we have the major area of study guidelines, and we also have the concentration guidelines. If you look at your degree program using BP Planner, and that's that image here to the right, you'll see that you have two different columns where you can arrange all your knowledge. You can use your prior learning assessment credits, and they could be focused on the concentration or general knowledge, and any other expectation could be just listed in this degree in your degree program and essay. Now, some fields of study have more specific knowledge expectations, and a couple of examples that we're using here is the business, as well as the information technology, accounting, and information system. You'll learn a little bit more about information technology in a couple of minutes. But there are other ones that provide you with more flexibility. Again, just be open to interpretation on those guidelines, and just remember you don't have to have a course for everyone if you can demonstrate that knowledge in any other ways. So the first example we have here is for the information technology concentration that falls under the science, math, and technology area of study. And this is a concept map that we created to use as an example, but you can certainly do it in many different ways. The key points for something like information technology are that you're going to have general knowledge, breadth, organizational and social context, theory, development, and management of systems, and also have currency as an important piece of your degree program. Now, I don't want to discuss all of these, what really means all these knowledge areas, but rather just mention that in any concentration, what you have to demonstrate is that you have some basic foundational general knowledge, as well as a progression to more detailed upper level knowledge within that concentration. And that's what you see in this, if you go from the left to the right, between general knowledge all the way to currency. Now, I know a couple of you are going to achieve a concentration in information technology. A couple of things to keep in mind. The information technology could be a very confusing concentration to read and understand the guidelines. A couple of points. Currency. What currency means is if you're bringing some credits through prior learning assessment or transfer credits that were taken many, many years ago, and they are about a particular software that is not being used right now, they're not up to currency within the field of information technology. So that's one. So something that is obsolete might not help you in your degree. Currency also means in terms of not only the knowledge that you're bringing in terms of a particular subject, but also the understanding of emerging and evolving technologies. So to satisfy this piece of the currency knowledge for information technology, there are many different ways that you can complete that piece of the guidelines. The other one I wanted to mention is it happens in information technology. I'm pretty sure it happens in other concentrations in which we have particular guidelines that we do not have course-specific that will satisfy that. And again, it goes back to the principle of you do not need a course for every single piece mentioned in the guidelines. The example for information technology is human-computer interface and information assurance. Those two you can bring to prior learning assessment. You can explain in your rationale how you know about these subject knowledge areas, and or you can do independent studies. And I'm pretty sure, again, that this happens in some other concentrations. Just keep in mind that.
And Audie was just talking about a concentration that has guidelines that are quite specific. And you saw on the very nice concept map here that what she did and what you might want to do when you're working with the guidelines is to draw a concept map and pull out the major concepts and then explain with additional bubbles how you've addressed those through coursework, through prior learning, and however you've addressed those. Sometimes there are guidelines that are quite a bit more flexible and open to even more interpretation. And those are generally guidelines for degrees that are not as professionally based. For example, we have a few students in our group doing degrees in cultural studies. There's somebody doing a degree in history. There's somebody doing a degree in literature. And if you look at, I just pulled out one example of one little bit of the general cultural studies guideline. It says students designing programs should explore the ways in which human beings understand and articulate their world. Now that's pretty broad, and you can interpret that in a number of ways. It might be through literary texts. It might be through how history is written at a certain time period, because history is written differently at in different eras. So that's just one example of how a very broad guideline might be, or how very broad a guideline might be. If you look at the cultural studies literature guidelines for that particular type of concentration underneath the umbrella of the main area of cultural studies, again, in those bulleted points, you see very broad guidelines, a substantial body of literary texts, including literature of different periods. Well, we're not telling you, if you want a lit concentration, that you have to take a Shakespeare and you have to take a modern American lit and you have to take a whatnot. We do leave that open to you and your mentor to discuss and decide on what is a substantial body of literary texts for different time periods. Again, the relationship between literature and the historical literary context in which it developed. Well, that might mean, if you're doing a literature concentration, that you took an American Lit course, and then you also took an American History course that dealt with the same era, so that you're coming at that information from a couple of different perspectives. But it might also mean that instead you took a course in American culture, or you took a different type of course that gave you some context for understanding the literature that you've read and interpreting the literature that you've read. And I think you get the idea here. Some guidelines, especially the ones that deal with more professionally based degrees, are a little bit more specific. Other guidelines are a little bit more general. But the main concept is that they're all guidelines, and they all are open to some interpretation. And what you're doing when you're working with guidelines and writing your rationale essay is you're working with your mentor and you're discussing your own interpretation. Now, that's also an informed interpretation, and that's where the academic expectations piece of your rationale essay comes in. You're not interpreting the guidelines and saying, well, I think it means that, and that's what I'd really like to take, so that's what I'm going to put in my degree, and that's what I'm going to write about in my rationale essay. But the academic expectations piece really explains how you have analyzed and interpreted those guidelines. So you might, for example, in your rationale essay, take some of that bulleted list that you just saw, or take some of the bubbles on the mind map and explain how you've addressed that knowledge in your degree. And again, if you see what's on the slide, there is no one right way to do this. There's just your own way. So your analysis and your interpretation become key. And that's usually the harder part of the rationale essay to write. The easier part to write for a lot of people is the part that deals with goals. And that's the other piece that you need in your rationale essay. And that usually is used as an introductory piece because you need to explain the context in which you're pursuing your degree. What do you want to learn? How do you anticipate using the degree after you have it? You know, what do you really want to do with your degree? And why are you pursuing this type of degree? So that kind of sets the context for your academic choices. And then when you go into the academic expectations explanation, you are really explaining how you yourself have interpreted those guidelines and have included the knowledge that those guidelines expect in a degree. And again, here on this slide, you see that most students do write about their goals easily because you're writing very personally there. You're writing about yourself and what you know. When you write about academic expectations, that's often the part that a lot of people struggle with a little bit more. But you don't have to be afraid of it. Just approach it really directly. So, and understand that you're going into a little more of an analytical mode here. You're providing research and reasons why your choices for your degree are valid. And again, the research, a lot of that research goes back to those guidelines. So you're really kind of comparing what you have in your degree and explaining how what you have in your degree addresses those guidelines. And as Audie said earlier, you can address those guidelines through coursework in your degree or through PLA, or you might not even have a course or a PLA credit. And you might say, I'm addressing this guideline through the learning I've gained at work, and this is how I've done it. And you can write that in your rationale essay as well. So again, the academic expectations, you're explaining or analyzing your degree program in the context of the Empire State College guidelines and within any other contexts that are appropriate. For example, if you're pursuing an accounting concentration, you are really going to want to look at requirements for accountants, and you're going to want to look at their professional websites. Or if you're doing a degree that you intend to be similar to a degree at another college, research that other college catalog. You don't have to research another college catalog, and you don't have to research what the profession requires if that's not appropriate to your own degree. But if it is, those are also good sources of research along with the Empire State College guidelines. And to finish off, kind of the rationale essay bottom line, you need to realize that your essay and your degree plan are going to be read and reviewed by an assessment committee made up of Empire State College faculty and professionals. And all the faculty that you're working with sit on assessment committee at one time or another. And assessment committee members really want to know why you're pursuing your degree. They want to know that context that you're dealing with. They want to know why you've chosen the particular focus in your degree and how you've structured your degree. And then again, they want you to shift into how does your degree address those ESC general and specific guidelines. And a lot of the discussion in assessment committee meetings is just that. How have you interpreted those guidelines, and do your choices address those guidelines for knowledge in your degree? And they also want to know if you did some research, what research did you do? What are your sources? You need to document your sources. So we hope that has answered some of your questions about guidelines and rationale essays, and we also hope it generated some questions too, so that you can connect with your mentor and talk about the guidelines and the rationale essay as it's progressing. So I'm going to say goodbye, and Audie?
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you, and I will end the recording now, and thanks everyone.
Thanks, Betty.